evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special edition of V-Gaming Junkie News. Normally I'd transition between news and reviews, but I'm doing things a bit differently this time in the wake of E3. I'm going to get my take on E3 for all 5 of you who actually care. Y'all ready for this? Too bad I'm doing it anyway. I'll be making a top 10, starting of course with the bottom and working my way up to number 1. I figured that's a pretty good way of going about it, saving the best for last and all that good jazz. With that in mind, the bottom of this totem pole begins with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity Wave of the Ancients. It being at the bottom is in no way a condemnation. I loved the original Hyrule Warriors. That being said, I never really got the chance to try Age of Calamity just yet, and this is an expansion on top of that rather than a brand new game. That being said, it still looks quite good and easily earns my number 10 spot on this list. It has some interesting gameplay of Link using some kind of extendo whip that seems to consist of 2 ancient robots as arms, and then Zelda comes in on a freaking Master Cycle. I'm sure I'll play Age of Calamity someday, and this definitely has me pumped for when that day comes. Number 9 is the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. I haven't really played that much of Ace Attorney, but I can tell this one's going to be even more interesting than previous titles. Not gonna lie, the name Herlock Sholmes is actually pretty amusing to me. I'm sure it was meant as a parody, or maybe it's because for some reason Sherlock Holmes is a copyright minefield. Apparently, just having a more sympathetic version is enough to get you sued by an incredibly greedy estate because later stories that had him sympathetic are copywritten, I guess. Sorry, back to the game. I like the Victorian England aesthetic, especially for the judge, so it should be pretty fun when it comes out. Number 8 is Age of Empires 4, and I know this one might seem like a bit of a cheat. Technically, it doesn't have any definitive gameplay in it, but the overviews do look like you could throw on a UI and call it a day. Well, assuming these are reflective of how the final game will look and not a deceptive marketing practice that certain companies like the one beginning with a U and ending with soft love doing, it sort of looks like it's got the graphical detail of the latest 3, but even better, but combine that with a more medieval aesthetic like the first 2, and the title screen looking image is definitely reminiscent of 2. Hopefully it turns out good, because I actually really like Age of Empires, especially Rise of Rome. Number 7 is The Outer Worlds 2. Mostly because the trailer kinda got a chuckle out of me. It's all cinematics, but it really pokes fun of itself and game trailers in general that have nothing really concrete to show yet. Hopefully that means they'll have a real gameplay trailer to show soon enough. I enjoyed the first one, so I'm hoping this one was a little linear for what's clearly trying to be a sandbox game, and especially the loading zones got a bit annoying. Maybe also more choices along the way, since in the end it seemed to boil down to 2, with one of them being the completely insane "what are you doing" option. At least it excites me far more than anything related to Fallout 76, one of which got an E3 trailer, but that isn't going anywhere near this list. Number 6 is Psychonauts 2, and it's looking pretty fabulous if I do say so myself. Admittedly, I only played a bit of the first one, and it was the PS2 version emulated, so it was glitchy, but even then the charm and humor were winning me over. I really should go back to that game at some point, probably the PC version so it doesn't have to suffer from bugs. The second one looks to be continuing the humor, and from what I can tell the platforming doesn't look half bad either. If it can keep me laughing, that'll definitely be a plus. Number 5 is one that really surprised me to see, Advanced Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. It seemed like one of those franchises that was all but dead, and yet here it is. I've only played a bit of the GBA one, but I enjoyed the light RTS elements and the humor that came along with it. It, of course, looks to be using the same grid-based turn system with rock-paper-scissors mechanic. Hopefully it'll have a good amount of depth and humor to it. Being someone who appreciates games like Age of Empires and Command & Conquer, with Age of Empires 4 actually being on this list, I won't turn down the chance to have even more strategy games like this. Coming down to the wire now, number 4 is Warcry Challenges. Not gonna lie, this is probably 100% peer-graded bias, and I'm not afraid to say that either. It looks like an old-school first-person shooter that has you jumping, gunning, and apparently using psychic powers. Not that much is really revealed about it, but I imagine it's more of an indie game, so I can be very forgiving. Point is, it looks like a very fun game to play, and sometimes that's all you really need. Also helps that the trailer is purely gameplay, no massive amounts of cinematics to distract you with. Coming down to the wire, number 3 is of course the Elden Ring. These 3 fall into the category of games I'm genuinely hyped for in a big way and want to pick up and play at my earliest convenience. Having become really attached to Dark Souls 3 despite the sheer amount of frustration and hatred I levied at it, of course I'm going to be hyped for From Software's next game automatically. The aesthetic and designs, and of course the same excellent gameplay, have me chomping at the bits, and I'm sure the plot is really deep too. You can tell they took from their experience with PS5's Demon's Souls 2 because the game on a technical level is absolutely gorgeous. This one's on my watch list for sure, and let's just hope that the writer of Game of Thrones can do it justice. Number 2 is Zelda Breath of the Wild 2, naturally. Funny how that works out. I absolutely adored the first game with its emphasis on exploration in the big expansive world that actually made traveling around it pretty thrilling. The new stuff showed off in this trailer like bokoblin fortresses on top of a talus and Link somehow going through solid matter definitely has my attention. Between that, new aspects like a tech gauntlet in place of a slate and a floating castle of pure evil that reminds me of Ganondorf's castle from Ocarina of Time, you better believe I'm excited. I can only hope that the mummy Ganondorf becomes rehydrated Ganondorf because it just isn't satisfying sending him back into oblivion unless he's fighting at his maximum strength. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Number 1 is ESBC Esports Boxing Club. I'm sure you guys know that I've always been a massive fan of boxing, so you better believe I'm totally hyped for... No, can't do it. Don't worry, that was just a really bad joke. Those of you who know what my old username was will probably have already seen this coming a mile away. You guessed it, it's Orcs Must Die it's Metroid Dread. Not gonna lie, this had my jaw about hitting the floor when I found out about it. I was really hoping for some Metroid Prime 4 news, but what I didn't expect was a brand new Metroid game instead. Well, newish. It was supposed to come on the DS, so revival of what was to be a new Metroid game. Beyond my obvious bias, the trailer itself is absolutely gorgeous to look at. It starts out with a pretty intense cinematic suggesting the unknown robot is going to play the role of SAX and stalk Samus in a cat and mouse game before transitioning into the gameplay aspect. The gameplay side of things definitely looks like an evolution of Samus Returns with the melee counters making a comeback. There's even what looks like a living Chozo giving her an upgrade, so perhaps the rumors of their extinction were greatly exaggerated. Other things to note are Samus' new blue and white design and her seeming to magnetically climb up a wall akin to a non-morph balled spider ball. Between the shock and awe, you better believe I'm ultra psyched for this, and assuming Prime 4 is in development, that means we can expect both a 2.5D and 3D Metroid game. Much like Mario, both styles have their charms, and I'd love to see plenty of both in the future. This has been my top 10 for this year's E3. If you agree with my list, make sure to give that like button a hard mash. And if you disagree, subscribe and comment below what your personal favorites were. I'll go back to regular video games news next week, and then after that, a new game review. Game reviews aren't nearly as much a priority for getting out quickly, I hope you guys understand. Thank you so much for tuning in with me. Stick around my channel if you like Let's Plays and live streams, but if you don't, I'll just see you next week Sunday.